All right, I think we've waited long enough now. Let's get going. So today we're going to talk about a topic that I've probably heard more than any topic over the history of SCOM and my time in SCOM, which is SCOM still relevant? It's the topic that is forever, really. But it's still a valid question, and we'll get into kind of why in a second. But before we do, let me just really quickly introduce myself. So I'm Bruce Cullen. I'm Director of Products here at SquaredUp. Also a founding member of Cookdown, and I have a very special guest with me today. So I'd like to welcome Dieter Wijckmans to the stage. Dieter, you're a Microsoft MVP, and this isn't your first radio with SCOMathon and coffee breaks. Welcome back.
No, indeed. It's not my first radio. I'm glad to be back.
It's great to have you. You're going to take us through today's session, but before you do, I'm going to just give a bit of setup, really, a bit of context and stage setting. So if I get you to cast your mind back a few years to 2012, to probably the biggest release of SCOM back in the day in SCOM 2012, which GA'd on the 17th of April 2012. It was the biggest thing we've had in SCOM. And probably it will always be this way. We've had many big releases since. We've had 2019, we're on 2022, 2025 is in the offing, and that's great. And obviously we now have MI, but I don't think we've had so much change in one go as at this point. But this date is relevant. This year is very relevant for another reason. There was another thing that happened in this year that is equally very important and clearly relevant as well. This is June 2012, and who remembers this lovely Silverlight portal of the early incarnation of the Azure portal? If you look down the list of things that are called out, lots of infrastructure is called out, but this is essentially an embryonic version of the Azure portal. Little did we know back in 2012 that this would fundamentally change things. Wind forward a few years later, 5 years later in particular, to Azure Monitor, where we got our first sneak peek of Azure Monitor in January of 2017. Interestingly, while it has changed look and feel wise, it hasn't changed as much as the Azure portal, which is kind of interesting in itself. So now we have SCOM on-prem, historically at least, and we have Azure Monitor, cloud native. So we have for the first time really, which tool do we use? Obviously, we had OMS and log analytics in the mix before and whatnot, which is always kind of interesting, which does, raise the question, is SCOM still relevant? And winding forward the clock, over 10 years since 2012 came out, and having a look at the Google Trends data, this red line here is April 2012, which is when SCOM 2012 appeared, and look at some of the trends. So some of SCOM's bread and butter, so Windows Server and Exchange Server, for example, trending down, as is XML, which is the language that MPs are authored in, obviously. Even the beast of VMware and Hyper-V, infrastructure-related topics, are all kind of trending down. And conversely, things that are trending up, obviously Azure was going to be in the mix, trending up significantly. The really interesting one for me in here is Office 365, now Microsoft 365, and of course JSON, more declarative language, and much more modern and easier to work with than XML. So there's been quite a shift in technology, which really raises the question of today's webinar, is SCOM still relevant? And Dieter, this is the perfect place to bring you in, because I'm not going to answer the question. I'm going to let you do that. So I'm going to hand over to you at this point and let you do the heavy lifting here for me.
That was one of the most, entertaining, to be honest, intros I got, because normally it's, hey, it's Dieter here and just do your things. I'm going to switch over and I'm going to share my screen to get control of the, let's see, the slides. Hold on just a sec. This is new. Let's see.
This is the joy of webinar platforms.
Yeah,
and new ones.
Always the new ones. So you should see my screen now. Oh, I always start with a bit of an agenda. And people who've seen my sessions already, I always try to create my sessions around, typical questions, or let's say general questions. And the question of today is, of course, is SCOM still relevant? Well, you mentioned it already. This is also a question I get. It's in my top 2, and I think it's even on the top, to be honest, because a lot of people are asking whether SCOM, they're seeing it as a bit of a dinosaur, whether it still has a place in this modern world with all the things you mentioned. So first of all, we're going to talk about why this session, where is SCOM today and in the near future, which is also very important to, well, create relevance, the key factors and challenges which we still have and probably will have in the future. And then I will also give some insights on my personal experience on when to use SCOM in which scenarios. It used to be very easy to say, okay, we have an on-premise environment, we're going to use SCOM, but now, of course, because we have so much elements, from time to time, it's better to use another tool or a combination or whatever. So if you can click, that would be awesome.
Click.
So why this session? Well, I already mentioned it. You can click again, please. Yeah. I already mentioned why this session. It is one of my top questions. And if I go in for a monitoring project, or when I'm even rolling into a monitoring project because a company has hired me for Azure environment or setting up some Azure services, I always ask them, did you think about backup monitoring and BRP? And well, most of the time monitoring, they have some monitoring, but it's still on premise. So it needs to be, well, extended, or it needs to be reconfigured or even just redone. So full redesign. And if I mention SCOM, they always say, SCOM, you mean System Center Operations Manager? That's for on-premises only, right? They have, most of them already worked with Ops Manager, but 5 years ago or 6 years ago in another mission. And they're still convinced that Ops Manager only is relevant for on-premise monitoring. And it is still a huge beast that you need to tame and that you need to look into and whatever. So that's the first question I have. And I always give the same answer in the comparisons, which I'm going to give you also during this webinar, to make sure that you can also, well, at least answer that question. And you would be surprised that the question is that the answer is not always yes. It depends. So that's already a spoiler for the rest of the session. And last but not least, I just love SCOM. I'm not biased at all, but I just love SCOM because all the things I was able to do with SCOM that people told me that was just not possible, just got a little bit easier, because a lot of things, of the recent things that SCOM actually got during the life cycles were all pinpointed to that hybrid scenario. So can you please click to the next one? So to find out the relevance of SCOM, first of all, we need to look at where SCOM is today. So if you can click, yes. I see myself as a SCOMasaur because I started working with MOM 2000. So it was even back in the day, it was Microsoft Operations Manager. And if you go into some management packs and if you go into some agents, the reference to MOM are still there right from the beginning. And it was in 2000 that it was released. And then I worked with 2005, 2007, 2012, 12 R2 as well, 16, 19, 22, and all versions in between. We will not forget 1801 and 1807, which was a happy time if you had to do some, let's say, maintenance in an environment, because if you chose 1801, you couldn't go to 2016, vice versa, whatever. It was quite a challenge back then, but luckily they went down the path of 2022. Can you click one more? Yes. So this is the release cadence. It took me quite some effort to actually get all these dates, but in fact, this is the release cadence. And if you see, from SCOM 2012 and SCOM 2012 R2, within 10 years, we got 3 or 4 iterations. We got some update rollups, some R rollups as well, but the Rs are not there anymore. It used to be 2012 R2, and then they gone to 2016, 2019, 22. And you see that the cadence here in the beginning was like 4 years, then 3 years, 2 years. That was really close, 2007, 2007 R2, and then 2012, 16, 2019, 2022. So they kept a little bit the, let's say, release date, but if we see on the next slide, here, these are some of the key evaluation points just to show you where we came from. People who worked with MOM 2000 and MOM 2005, well, it's the same thing as we had with the picture of Azure. It was basically just an in and out console. There's something happening in an event log, I need to alert. That was it. We didn't even have monitors, so every time that alert came in the event viewer, you got an alert. Quite annoying for the people, but that was at that time groundbreaking because there was nothing else. There was no, let's say, open source, NetIQ, whatever. There was basically almost no monitoring, and all the monitoring I came across at that time was all done by either creating something small yourself, custom, or having a big company portal with all custom things where people left and handover and left and left and left. So no one knew what was going on. So MOM at that point was groundbreaking. 2007, that was, in my personal opinion, one of the biggest steps we made from MOM 2000, MOM 2005 to SCOM 2007. And people who wanted to move from MOM 2000 or 2005 to SCOM 2007 had to redo the entire environment, which was quite convenient at that time. And we got Windows Server monitoring and improved health models. Health models, introduction of the monitors. Groundbreaking, to be honest, because we had logic then in the different alerts. SCOM 2012, we got resource pools. Can you imagine that we still had no resource pools in 2007? Enhanced network monitoring and scalability. 2016, the first cloud integration and support for newer server technologies was introduced. Very important mark, because at that point, SCOM got out of the on-premise world and into the hybrid world. It wasn't ideal, but there was a cloud integration. And in the beginning, it was just connecting to a log analytics workspace and getting some alerts from there. Really basic. And I think it didn't even was log analytics at that time, but two, three names back. And I can't mention the name that Microsoft never had for that product, which is OMS. SCOM 2019 improved Azure integration and performance. We saw a huge spike there. And SCOM 2022, of course, we have the advanced hybrid monitoring capabilities and enhanced security. One of the cool things I want to mention here is, in fact, that we were in a limbo between 2012 and 2016. That was a time where SCOM, in my personal opinion, was a bit dead in the water, because there was a lot of investment in Azure Monitor, log analytics, OMS, whatever. And SCOM was seen as a tool only able to monitor on-prem. Starting from 2016 all the way up to 2022, you see that it has become a hybrid monitoring solution. Can you advance, please? And we're still not there yet. Some roadmap things, there will be investment in cloud integration even more. You will see that later on. There will be more advanced analytics and AI-driven insights, I hope. Further performance optimization and scalability enhancements. And if you click one more, this is what I would like to see coming. And probably there's already something on the horizon for this, but IoT monitoring is still lacking. A lot of companies have IoT devices in their environment, and they monitor it as a bit of a network device, but still specific IoT monitoring. We have it in Azure already, in IoT Hub and whatever, so it would be cool to actually pull that also into Operations Manager. I would love, because I made the transition to work with CI/CD pipelines, and I would love to see that I could use that pipeline even more to develop management packs as a project together with a lot of people, and move away from the Visual Studio Code. And enhancements of management pack authoring using perhaps AI. It would be awesome that at one point SCOM could or would create its own management packs for 80-90%, and you just have to fill in things and then move from there. I think the technology is there, but we just have to, well, keep requesting it. So please push that virtual request button. Can you advance, please? So that's where we are today, in my opinion. If you have another opinion, feel free to send me a mail. I always say, if you can spell my name, you can find me on the internet. I'm not really a fan anymore of X or whatever, but if you send me a small DM on LinkedIn, or if you can find my name, you can always send me via various things. I will always be able to discuss, because I like discussing the monitoring tool that I use the most. So the key features and challenges in today's world, advance please, are in fact, SCOM is still for me personally, and a lot of things I'm saying now is based on my personal experience. It's not that I'm saying that you have to take this for granted, but it's just to spark also the discussion. For me, SCOM is still the only fully manageable and changeable monitoring solution of Microsoft. There are others in the market as well, but that you can compare with Azure Monitor and Log Analytics. I mean, I can spend an entire day trying to, pinpoint open source monitoring tools and SCOM and other tools. But if I compare Operations Manager today with Azure Monitor and Log Analytics, I created a lot of, let's say, workshops and sessions where a lot of people try to convince me otherwise. But for me, with the knowledge I have of SCOM and the experience I have with SCOM, for me, it's still the only fully manageable and changeable monitoring solution. For example, if you want to do something special with an Azure Monitor alert rule, you're still bound to the standard mail, or you have to create a workbook or whatever. In SCOM, you still have the possibility to create a message and change the message, for example. So if at one point you're in a project and people ask, can I have that in the mail or that in the mail, you need to go already into the Azure ecosystem and try something else and pass data, while SCOM already has it in place. And for me, which is one of the key things for this session as well, it has evolved from, it's possible to monitor Azure as well, but to, sure, SCOM can monitor your hybrid environment without losing functionality. In the beginning, I had to, let's say, link SCOM via a workbook to Log Analytics, and then write something into with that workbook into a server, and that server was then monitored by SCOM, and it picked it up, and then I had an alert out of Azure. I think that's 6-7 years ago. Now it's just easy because it's integrated. So we made a huge step. So in today's world, I think it's still the only fully manageable, changeable monitoring solution, and we got a lot of functionality for that hybrid environment. Can you click once more, please? So the challenges, of course, there are challenges. One of the things, or a couple of things that didn't change since 2000, to be honest, is a steep learning curve. If you work with SCOM, you have to admit that in the beginning, if you don't take it seriously and we've all done it. Hey, I've installed a SCOM, I didn't calculate my SQL DBase, I just dumped all my agents in there, I dumped all my management packs in there, I had no, let's say, tuning or whatever, and then suddenly SCOM is a bad product because it's just giving me so much alerts and I have no clue what I'm doing. There is a steep learning curve. So if you can avoid to reschool your staff or rewrite procedures, and you can just use SCOM, which they already know, and monitor your hybrid environment, you already have overcome that challenge, because it's the same look and feel. They're still using the same console. They still do the same things, but now they can also use the hybrid environment, or they can monitor the hybrid environment. Integration with existing systems. Sometimes it still requires a custom solution. We made huge steps, but we're not there yet that we can say, okay, we monitor the entire Azure environment. Every time there are new steps, and every time I'm pretty convinced if I go into an MVP call that there are so many things coming, and it's really strange to be honest, that's also my personal opinion, that SCOM is still seen as a only on-premises monitoring tool, while actually it has become a hybrid environment monitoring tool. Another challenge, of course, is configuration. You have to, well, avoid alert fatigue, and that's one of the things I stress the most with people. If at one point you're sending alerts and people are creating just rules to dump them into a folder and the alerts become just a blue number which is rising every day, you're not sending alerts. Every time
Yeah, you've created a spam machine at that point.
Yeah, that's the thing. And also one of the things I always tell people, and that those are two questions, and when I do sessions, people always laugh, but it's true. If you ask someone, what do you want to monitor? They will always tell you everything. And if you ask them, where do you want to be notified for at 3 a.m.? Well, it's far less than everything. So the truth is somewhere in between. Another challenge is keeping track of the relevance of alerts can be challenging. It's basically the same thing as the first, let's say, configuration, and keeping track of the latest version of SCOM and all its components. There is a solution now, or there is a solution in the pipeline, which is awesome. But if you are still on on-premises installation, it's you who needs to take care of the new versions of SCOM. Luckily, they went away from the 1801, 1807 side track. But again, still you need to, well, look into that. So those are the challenges. Can you click once more, please? Yes. So let's dive a little bit deeper in scenarios. I love to talk about scenarios when we do monitoring, because every monitoring is normally solving a scenario when things are going bad. And also, if you talk about tools or tooling, there's always the right tool for the scenario, or at least the most right tool for the scenario. Because one of the things I've learned from years and years of experience with SCOM and also other monitoring tools in Azure is the fact that it's not possible to have one tool to rule them all.
No.
If you're trying to gonna do this with SCOM, you have to look at 100% development time. If at one point SCOM has 100% development time or budget, and it needs to monitor network, it needs to monitor servers, it needs to monitor applications, it needs to monitor hybrids, it needs to be divided in that 100% development time. If you create only a network monitoring tool, you have that 100% development time only for network. And probably you're gonna be better at it, but the question you need to ask is, do I need that extra 15% that they're better in than what SCOM is giving me? If the answer is yes, you need to introduce the new tool. If the answer is no, it's fine. Can you click once more? So, when to use SCOM in your scenarios? First of all, there's no one-stop shop out there. Even I like SCOM, but sometimes I just say, okay, there's probably another tool who can do this better, Kibana or whatever, for monitoring or application purposes, application monitoring purposes or whatever. If we're talking about server environments, I mean, SCOM is still way up there in the quadrant. But if you do specific things, really niche things, and you have specific tools for that, most of the time, those tools are better in monitoring that specific niche than SCOM. You can probably use that other tool for a job, but it will take some time. Meaning, if you try to have the same functionality on, for example, network monitoring, well, you're going to eat your spoon with a fork if you want to do it with SCOM, because it's going to work, but you will never have that same level of monitoring that you have with the dedicated tool. I will describe 3 common scenarios, but there are a lot of scenarios in between these 3. But I will give you 3 scenarios, let's say on-premises, hybrid, and Azure only, where I, from my personal experience, should use SCOM or not use SCOM. And last but not least, and that's something I tell everyone, is the fact that always select the tool you think will do the job, not because you might have a preference or your manager has. If at one point you are responsible for monitoring and you need to set it up and manager says, hey, I want to use this tool, and you're not convinced, make sure that you pinpoint strongly your point saying, I'm not convinced. And if they want to go with that tool, that they can't come back to you and say, hey, monitoring is crappy because, well, the tool is crap. Make sure that you find the right tool and stick with it. Can you click? So scenario one is quite, well, the classic story. Fully on-premise environment. We've all been there, and there are still a lot of companies who are still in this scenario, because Microsoft, when they want to, well, push, or they wanted to market the cloud, they said, well, cloud first, meaning everybody in the cloud, and on-premises environments will be gone in the year 2020 or whatever. They will not exist anymore. No one will have a data center. Well, we've all seen that that didn't happen. So in the end, then they said cloud first, then they said hybrid cloud or private cloud. Private cloud, on-premises cloud was also a thing, slowly walked away. So in the end, now we are in my personal belief, the most, well, classic story, and that's the hybrid ones. But we're now fully on-premise environment, meaning that we have physical servers, we have a lot of applications, whether they're in-house written, standard applications of Microsoft, standard applications of third-party vendors. You have a high secure environment with no connection to the outside world. That happens, still happens. A lot of banks and whatever, they have very strict outside connections, so they are probably not allowed, or they will not expose their assets or their money makers to the internet to use the Azure environments or the Azure services. And it's also the possibility to work with a team on a product and escalate to different teams, meaning you have a fully on-premise environment. It's caved in. And for this, of course, use SCOM. It's also possible to use Azure Monitor for this, but in the end, the functionality will be less than when you use SCOM. But of course, you need to take for granted the, let's say, steep learning curve and the team and whatever. But if you find people, and I'm pretty happy to say that a lot of young people or people in a generation below me, because I'm getting older and older, are also getting interested in SCOM at least, which I, as a SCOMosaur, can always like, because, well, the fact is, if people are still interested in the product, normally it will still survive. Can you click once more? So scenario two, I mentioned it already, hybrid environment, meaning you still have things in a data center, which will not go away, which are left behind during a migration, or just installed due to the fact that it will cost too much to run it in the cloud or whatever. And then on the right side, you have things in the public cloud. It's the most common scenario today. I think a lot of companies are here. When you started a company and you didn't have a data center, you're probably in the cloud only, because you basically created on a platform. But if at one point you had on-premises and you still have it in your data center or in a rented data center from time to time, and I haven't seen recently a lot of people just move out of the data center completely to Azure. It's possible, but haven't seen a lot. So the connection between on-premises servers and Azure services and services has been greatly improved since 2016, and now we are in 2022. And the need to have one tool as a central point of escalation to start your processes. That's one of the things which I always tell people, which is the most overseen point, is the fact that you need to have an entry point or a start for your processes. Escalation, change management, maybe a little bit less, but escalation, monitoring, also, let's say, CMDB, for example, you need to have one tool. Can you click once more? So then the obvious scenario 3 is the cloud-only environment. I haven't seen a lot, but cloud services are used in your environment. You don't have an on-premise environment, so everything is in Microsoft's or AWS data center. And you need a robust tool that will give you more capabilities than Azure services, Azure Monitor, alerts, log analytics. At that point, you can use operations manager. But of course, it will be a huge step because you need to get into installing operations manager. You need to manage it yourself while all the other services I mentioned here, Azure Monitor, alerts, and analytics, you just consume, but there is no worry about infrastructure or whatever. And you want to keep your knowledge from on-premises into cloud without a steep learning curve. So you could use SCOM here, or you could use another tool depending on the needs. I will come back to that later with the SCOM Managed Instances, which is an awesome milestone, to be honest. But can you click once more? So in the end, I gave you 3 scenarios where to use SCOM, but there are also scenarios where I say, okay, I slowly walk away because SCOM is not the right tool for you. And to be honest, I love to do this after workshop. That's also why I always start with a workshop of 5 days and giving people just knowing the environment before I make an offer, just to make sure that not during mid-project people will hit roadblocks or whatever, and we will have a discussion then, because those are mostly not fun discussions to have. The scenarios where I don't, let's say, recommend SCOM is your monitoring scenarios are not elaborate enough, meaning if you just have one application, if you just have one server or 2 servers which are somewhere residing, it doesn't make sense to include, or it doesn't make sense to set up the entire infrastructure only for those 2 things. You need to have, let's say, scenarios. So you only want monitoring tool for one specific case. For example, if you set up SCOM just to monitor network devices, for example, there are far more lightweight tools out there only for monitoring network devices. So to be completely honest, it would be overkill to install SCOM, but if SCOM comes into an environment, of course, you can use it for the other things as well. So it could be a stepping stone. But of course, the efforts to maintain the infrastructure will outweigh the gains far more. And there's probably a specific tool, like I mentioned, to monitor that specific niche or that specific scenario. When there's already another tool chosen, that's also one of the things I've seen. If the company already has another tool, and that tool has been the part of their processes and whatever, and you come in and you want to change that tool, you're just battling a fight uphill. Because in the end, people are used to a tool, it's included in the services, and as long as management will not be able to change it, or will not be giving you the mandate to change it, just keep away from that tool and try to, well, at least have your monitoring scenario in that tool. And if not, you can always see whether you can have other services of Azure gather just that specific tool. Can you click once more? So how to interconnect with SCOM? Most of us are living in a hybrid world. So that means that you need to cross that magical border of on-premises to Azure or other tools. So what are my options to do so? And let's find out from a SCOM perspective. When I started connecting Operations Manager with my first Log Analytics workspaces and whatever, there were no connections. There was no connectors, there was nothing. For SCOM, that this was just something unknown when suddenly something came in, and SCOM wasn't even aware that Azure was there. It could have been just a server in another site, but it was a huge data center which was growing rapidly. But for SCOM on-premises, it was just another server somewhere. Can you click once more? Yes. So the first scenario, SCOM lives on-premises, meaning your installation remains on-premises, backend on-premises, you want to monitor resources in Azure. So you have your existing Operations Manager environment, and you want to monitor resources in Azure. You could place a management server in Azure. It's still done today, meaning if you have interconnection, you could place a management server in Azure, or if Active Directory is not available, you could place a gateway server. But in the end, that's possible, and then you install the agents on you install the agents on your VMs, and you start monitoring as if those machines were on premises with the same rules and everything. Works fine. A lot of investments were done in the Microsoft monitoring agent because from the ground up, it wasn't built for a scenario or a platform where you pay for CPU and memory, which Azure is, unfortunately. So in the beginning, if you installed a SCOM management agent, it just chucked away as much resources as possible. And if you chuck away resources, of course, you're going to pay a little bit more. So you install an agent on an Azure-based VM and monitor them through SCOM environment. This was basically, or is still a valid option. Can you click, Bruce, please? Situation 2 is, and here we have the next holy grail, to be honest, and this has been one of the main asks for a lot of times, Plus, it was also one of the things that was the longest in development, to be honest, and that's SCOM Managed Instances. Meaning, for now, it is, for the first time possible, it's not, in my opinion, already 100% there, to use SCOM as a service. Meaning, you still need to do some stuff. You can't say, okay, install SCOM as a normal service in Azure, like from the catalog. You still need to do some infrastructure work and everything. But now it is possible to run SCOM on an infrastructure which is managed by Microsoft on the Azure platform, meaning the SQL backend, the servers, whatever, you don't have to worry about them anymore. And that's a cool thing. So if you want to install SCOM, look at managed instances. One of the most cool things that they actually did, which I'm very happy about, is the fact that if you're on-prem and you want to connect to a SCOM managed instance, which is living in Azure, you can still use the same old, reliable console. You have the SCOM console to connect. You don't have to go to a website. You don't have to go to anything else. So it looks and feels in the console that the engineer is working most of the time. It just looks and feels the same as it did on-prem. They didn't create like a managed instance console or a website or whatever. It's still the same console. So that's pretty cool. Can you advance once more? For people who were not aware yet, recently a lot of things came in preview regarding Azure Arc and SCOM managed instances. So the bridge between, let's say, the manageability of having to install the agents and whatever can now be arranged with Azure Arc, and Azure Arc will make sure that your machines, which are also on-prem, will be able to be monitored in SCOM managed instances, which is pretty cool because in fact, it's taking over the burden of creating that gateway server that was, to be honest, I'm not going to swear, but really difficult to install starting from 2007 all the way up to 2022 with certificates and everything. It was one of the things. Installing a gateway server was for me separating the, let's say, separating the good from the bad engineers. If you could do that, you were basically on my good side. Can you click once more? So just to wrap up before we go into Q&A, can you click once more? Because we're almost hitting the marker. I always try to stop my sessions with just resumeing a couple of things. If I want you to keep one thing in mind after this 45 monologue of me, is the fact that SCOM evolved in the monitoring world from solely an on-premises monitoring tool to a full-blown hybrid monitoring tool and beyond. What really strikes me, and that's again my personal opinion, is the fact that Microsoft isn't marketing SCOM that way at this point. Of course, Azure is the huge money maker, and a lot of Azure monitoring tools are getting also a lot of let's say a lot of budget and everything, while SCOM is getting it as well. But the thing is, try to convince people or try to convince yourself that SCOM came from the on-premises and is now evolved into a tool that has the possibility, and I'm saying it loud, has the possibility to monitor your hybrid environment as well. It's not because it has the possibility that it needs to be there, but it has the possibility. So if you already have SCOM in-house and you're moving to the cloud and the momentum shifts from on-premise to hybrid or vice versa, SCOM will be able to monitor also the dark side. SCOM is by no means replaced by Azure Monitor Log Analytics and still earns its place in the monitoring space. And it's also vice versa, meaning Azure Monitor and Log Analytics are also not replaced by SCOM. It's a better together scenario. And if the better together scenario, if you keep that in mind, you don't say, okay, we need one tool, it's a better together scenario. New investments are still made in the tool, both in tooling and management packs. I didn't mention the Azure Management Pack yet, but the Azure Management Pack was, when we were briefly chatting before this session, Bruce and I, was really for me an epiphany or an eye-opener, because that was the first time that a management pack was really made for the integration to Azure in both sides. Meaning it's not just taking, but looking, but it's also giving data or status back. And last but not least, look at where you want to have your environment. If a new project emerges, or even if you have SCOM already in your environment, there is rather easy, to be honest, there is a rather easy migration path between an on-premises SCOM environment and SCOM Managed Instances. So if at one point your momentum shifts from on-premises to Managed Instances, you can take all the knowledge you had to Managed Instances and still monitor those assets which remain on-prem, but lose the burden of keeping everything running the SQL databases yourself on the on-prem and taking advantage of the scalability in the Azure services, which are called now SCOM Managed Instances and probably will be renamed a couple of times later on. But again, that's one of the key things. So you are not stuck with SCOM. So all the investments you make on premises, you're not stuck on premises, and you don't need to start all over again in Managed Instances. You can just take the knowledge from what you did in on premises to the Managed Instances. Can you click once more? I think I'm basically at the end what I wanted to say. I don't know. I see some chat things. I didn't see well anything.
There were a whole bunch of questions whizzed by. So what I'll do, Dieter, is I'll whip through the last few bits I had, and then we'll go to Q&A, because that gives you a moment to take in the questions, and I can pose them to you one at a time.
Okay.
So firstly, awesome session, makes total sense, right tool for the right job. If this has been useful for you and you'd like to see more, then please do visit one of the various links on screen. All of the SCOMathon content, from coffee breaks to the SCOMathon event itself, is found at scomathon.com. And if you have a question that you have that comes to mind after today, go to community.squaredup.com where you can ask it. And everything you need is there essentially. I must get a plug in for the big SCOM survey before we leave today. Every year, more or less, we run a big survey to figure out how you guys are using SCOM, how your trends of usage are changing. And that survey is live right now. I'm planning to close it September-ish time, I think. Let it run over summer. But let me tell you, the insights so far have been very useful, and I look forward to sharing them on a webinar in September, October time. But please do complete it yourself. Obviously, vendors like myself make use of the data, but so does the SCOM product group for figuring out what to do with SCOM. And that's at scomathon.com/the big SCOM survey with hyphens in the middle. I must get a plug in, of course, to SquaredUp, which is clearly the company that I work for. There's been lots of talk of the right tool to use for the right job, clearly featured heavily in your session. And clearly, while I am biased, I completely agree. Getting SCOM to be the single pane of glass is just not realistic. There are things it's great for, and infrastructure monitoring is exactly that, but it's not great for everything. And ultimately, it comes down to using the right tool for the right thing. But it's important to have end-to-end visibility, which is what our cloud solution is all about, essentially. So we can pull together data from all of these tools, correlate it, and then surface insights by rolling up and allowing you to drill down into the details. Of course, if you're all based around SCOM and only SCOM, then we have our dashboard server product, which has been around for 10 plus years. It's the thing that the company was founded based on, that brings HTML5 lightning fast dashboards to the otherwise dull data in the SCOM console. So would obviously recommend it. And now, hopefully you've had time to take in the Q&A. I'm going to start going through what's in the chat.
I've seen a lot of questions, and my fellow young at heart connoisseur Bob already answered some, so that's pretty convenient. But a lot of them are always coming back saying, if I move to Azure, or I want to monitor Azure, what are the limitations? So there are, of course, some limitations, but as I mentioned as well, if you go to the managed instances, you're basically monitoring SCOM or Azure on the backbone of Azure itself. So you're tapping into the services themselves, while if you're still on-premises and use the Azure Management Pack, for example, you are not gaining that specific, let's say, knowledge. I've seen also a question here of Martin. He says, is there any point where you would say to move to Azure Monitoring over SCOM? Well, for me, it's quite easy. I would move to Azure Monitoring if you have a very small footprint, and the only thing you want to do is exposed in the log analytics workspaces. Meaning, if you only want to have, let's say, CPU memory of hosts or specific AVD stuff or whatever, and it's in the log analytics workspace, and it's a small project where you only need those specific small things, I would stay in Azure Monitor, to be honest. But if at one point you go into those hybrid environments or the more elaborate scenarios, in my personal experience, if I combine the two tools, if you already have SCOM in place and you already made the investment, of course, I would choose that one. But if you need to introduce SCOM just for one specific scenario, the burden and the gain of creating everything, even in the managed instances, could be a little bit too much in comparison to what you actually gain. But the issue is, and that's also a cool thing that I've seen in a lot of companies, is the fact that once SCOM is there, you made the investment, the adoption rate is very hard. It's very high. So people will start using it very rapidly. I'm just going to go over the questions one more time.
Just while you do that, just to add to that point, really, for my money, it's about the right tool for the right job. And there are scenarios where Azure Monitor is the right tool, but why does it have to be an either-or conversation? Why can't we use Azure Monitor for the things that make sense to use Azure Monitor for?
Yeah.
So things that are cloud native, where the data is in log analytics, and use SCOM for where we're talking about VMs and infrastructure. That would be the right use of the right tools, regardless of MI versus SCOM.
Yeah, that's the thing. Another thing here is, in fact, the SCOM 2022 with the Azure Monitoring Agent, whether it's supported. I think it's supported, but there are so many agents that I have to look into it, so I'm not going to make any bold statements. But I thought that the ecosystem of the Microsoft Monitoring Agent of SCOM 2022 was basically now the same as the agent you're using in Azure. So I'm seeing here hammered by traffic. Yeah, of course, if you install a SCOM agent solely for a couple of servers, you will have some data which is going to go back and forth. I'm not sure whether you can use throttling, but if you don't have a lot of management packs, of course, that data will go down. But if you stay, and that's also maybe a tip, if you stay within the same continent, it will be far less than when you, of course, go cross-continent or cross-Atlantic, because then things can go up very quickly. So at that point, I also invited or set people to set up managed instances to make sure that the data stays on one side of the pond and the other side of the pond. Maybe it's about Azure Monitor alert cost. Yeah, there are some remarks also that things are missing. Ask Rousseau said, Azure Monitor is lacking maintenance windows, distributed application concepts, and health model. It is not SCOM in the cloud. When we started and saw Azure Monitor arise, I was convinced that at one point, with a couple of views we got, that it was going to be almost the same as SCOM. But in the end, I don't know why, when, or how it happened, it took a different route, and we didn't get the health model. There were some efforts to do the health model with the VM insights and everything, which was pretty cool to see. But in the end, it's not the same thing as in SCOM. And that's also one of the things that I tried to mention during the session as well, is the fact that if you're familiar with those health models, if you're familiar with the distributed application concept, maintenance windows, whatever, it is possible to maybe create also maintenance windows with workbooks and everything, but it's you need to do it yourself. And I always tell people, if you have to do something custom and you leave the company, probably that custom will be custom for life, because no one will actually know how they need to change it, or they have to reverse engineer it or whatever. So
see, for me, that point is pretty on the money there. The health model and DAs are a key piece of what makes SCOM awesome. But I'd add management packs to the list. Obviously, there are ways to extend Azure Monitor, but I think quite like MPs, maintenance windows make sense. I've come across weird and wonderful workarounds, usually involving ITSM tools and suppressing incident creation for things during certain times. But yeah, you're right. That comment was on the money for me.
Yeah, it's also coming to, let's say, at one point we are used to working in SCOM. I also work with Azure Monitor and Log Analytics, of course. And Log Analytics, you have query packs, which are awesome as well. But we don't have, if you're familiar with management packs, we don't have an alternative where it's very portable to take monitoring from one, let's say, project or one environment to the other environment. It is possible, but it's not like a management pack where you just say, hey, I've created this on my environment, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to work on your environment as well, because I sealed it and it's all done. And if you load it in your environment, it will just do whatever I told it to do.
Yeah, couldn't agree with that more. There's lots of talk about cost as well. Cost is always an interesting topic, because the answer is always, it depends. It depends on what you're trying to monitor as to what makes the most sense and what's going to be the most cost effective. Is that true in your experience too, Dieter?
Well, the thing is, I always tell people cost is a big discussion. It's true. In the end, someone needs to pay the bill. But it's also the other aspects which are important, in the fact that if at one point you need to keep your on-premises environment alive only for SCOM and 2 other servers, or you need to buy new storage because your data warehouse is exploding or whatever, or you can use the scalability of SCOM Managed Instances, it's going to be, it's always going to be a discussion. The only thing which I always tell people, if they ask me how much is it going to cost to run SCOM in the cloud or SCOM Managed Instances, I always tell them I'm not going to give you a number.
Because there is no number.
And if I say a number, it will always be the calculator plus 15-20%. Because the discussion on numbers is better that the numbers come in lower than that they come in significantly higher, because then you're already mid-project and people start complaining about cost and whatever, and that's the thing.
Yeah,
Bob, that's true. we basically just buy the cloud. I mean, we don't care.
Private cloud, that's what we call that.
Private cloud. I think that's basically it from questions. Again, I mean, if you have questions, I'm not that good at hiding online. So you can always find me if you can spell my name. And even if you misspell my name, Google will or AI will correct it. So that's fine.
You'll find it on scomathon.com. Don't you worry there. You're easy to track down, Dieter.
That's the thing. So if you have questions now or after seeing this session or whatever, and you just want to go into, let's say, the discussion even more, because I have the feeling with the people who stuck around that we can have discussions for 2 hours and more. I think it's really cool to see that it's not only in my personal space or workspace or whatever that it's relevant. I see a lot of people struggling or having the same, let's say, thoughts about this SCOM still relevant. I saw someone who basically said, I sent my architect the mail because he said yesterday that SCOM is dead. So they are still around thinking that SCOM is dead. So that's pretty cool to see.
It's the oldest question in the book, basically, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's the thing. So in the end, if I have convinced a certain percentage of the attendees, I'm more than happy. And if you still need more convincing, or you need, let's say, parameters, or you need cases or whatever, just, well, DM me or send me a mail. I will be happy to actually make some time and see where I can help out. So.
Sounds good to me. All that's left to do then is say thank you very much, Dieter, for attending and for your awesome session today. And thank you to all of those out there for participating and being part of the SCOMathon community. Until next time, thank you very much. And don't forget to fill in the big SCOM survey. Thanks very much, all.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye, everybody.